There's a plane. It's Superboy. And Supergirl.
Or Superman.
This is Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action.
This is Mark Wade, writer of Superman Birthright.
And you're listening to The Krypton Report.
And you're listening to Krypton Report.
Up in the sky, look!
It's a bird.
It's a plane! It's the Krypton Report!
The All Things Kryptonian podcast, including Superman and Supergirl.
We discuss games, movies, cartoons, TV shows, and comics.
Find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. So the following episode is a special episode. It's a Requel. It's the second show that I started working on. But I'm talking with an old college roommate of mine about a little bit about our Batman love and history and how we kind of bonded over Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and we even pitched and created our own Batman reboot script called Legacy of the Dark Knight. But I'm going to be talking with Chase here soon about the upcoming The Batman. So I thought I'd give everyone just kind of a sample of where his mind is and what we did. So enjoy this kind of throwback episode. Lights, camera, action. Welcome to the Requel Podcast. The Requel Podcast is a podcast that was created as part of the Capes and Lunatics brand, where we're going to talk movies. We're going to talk, what we do is we take a film property and we discuss what would be better. Should we reboot this, do a soft reboot, make a sequel, make a prequel, or a requel? And if you're wondering what a requel is, well, sit back and listen and we'll tell you. Each week we have a special guest where we've decided on a film property or franchise, and we come up with options, ideas, and then what we do is we create our story and we pitch it to each other, and we decide which way we want to go, and then we let you guys also decide what your story would be. Welcome to Let's Requel. That's right. It's a new podcast. This is our first episode, and what we're going to do is we're going to discuss movies. But the idea is there a film that you really like that you wish they had done a sequel? Or is there a franchise you like that you feel has just kind of lost its way? So what our goal here is we're going to discuss a movie or a topic, and we're going to kind of pitch ideas to where we could take that property. See, would we want it to be a sequel, a prequel, a reboot, a soft reboot, or a.k.a. a requel? Now, we're going to try to avoid any kind of book properties and things like that because they kind of exist outside of moviedom. But what we're going to discuss today is, first of all, I'm really excited to have this guest with me today, and you'll probably find out why as we go through our conversation. But what we're going to be discussing is the Dark Knight Trilogy. And what you're saying is, wait, aren't there already multiple movies? Yes. But today's discussion is going to root on if you could make a sequel to The Dark Knight, not Rises, like right after The Dark Knight, would you want to make a story that goes in between the two films, or would you want to make a direct sequel to Rises where it ends with John Blake? And I can't do this by myself because that would be boring, so I bring forth today Mr. Chase Smith. Welcome, Chase.
What is up, Ty? Thanks for having me. First guest. I didn't know I was the first guest on the Requel podcast, dude.
Yeah, you are. We're working on building this up. I got interest, and so I asked Chase, because Chase is also the host of the Chase Smith podcast.
Yeah.
We'll see. Man, we have a very long history. But this particular, I want to say, like, for anybody who's listened to me on any of my other comic podcasts, Chase is the one that I borrowed The Long Halloween from, as well as Dark Victory. And I first read those two books because I borrowed them from him. So that helped get me back into wanting to read graphic novels when I was in college. And Chase is a huge fan of The Dark Knight.
So I don't know if I need to say you're welcome or I'm sorry. I don't know how I need to respond to that.
I'm going to go with you're welcome.
Yes. Well, yeah. Dude, it is an honor to be here. And, dude, talking about one of my favorite movies, literally of all time, The Dark Knight, man.
When we were in college, when this film came out, and the summer right before its release, when we heard that the toys had been released into stores, we drove to Walmart, got out, and were running through the store. Grown men running to the toys section to find that Joker figure.
That's right.
And where this gets even more fun is in the fall. We went back to school, and this time we had a house with 4 to 5 other guys. It's kind of a weird story. And when this movie came out, I was working at Blockbuster, and I got it 2 weeks early. And I had it at the house. We were watching it, and it just seemed like it was constantly playing. And then once it was released, it was constantly playing in somebody's room.
All the time.
I don't even know for how long. Like, it just seemed like it was constant. We had a TV in the basement, TVs upstairs, TVs in an individual room, and a living room. And one of them always had this film playing.
And it really hasn't changed. Anytime I'm with my wife and we're sitting down to watch a movie, we're like, what do you want to watch? And the first thing out of her mouth is not Dark Knight. And she knows that I'm not feeling well because it'll be playing on the TV. Like, that's just my go-to movie if I just want some background noise, or if I'm not feeling well, or even if they're, hey, let's watch a movie. It's always not Dark Knight.
Chase was living in North Carolina, and we went down to visit because my wife and I were thinking about moving down there, and we were hanging out at his place. And what did we watch? Dark Knight.
Dark Knight. Yes, but with the Dark Knight, though, not only were we excited about the toys, but they had an awesome pre-movie release campaign.
Oh my gosh, yes,
with
the viral marketing.
The viral marketing, that was, I think, a game changer that movies have always tried to replicate, but they haven't really been able to do it at that level of success that the Dark Knight did.
It's amazing how, when you sit down and you think about, it's almost been 10 years now since this movie came out, and how much of the movie landscape changed because of this film. Not only comic book films, but just regular.
There was a lot of hype around that movie, man. A lot of hype.
I've said this before, that if Green Lantern came out in 2011, if it had come out in 2007, it would have been a hit, because it felt more like the older style of the way to do a comic book film. And then when this hit in 2008, this changed everything, as well as Iron Man. Both of those in that year just kind of relaunched the superhero film.
I'm going to be honest, man. I tried to sit through Green Lantern, and I couldn't sit through it, so I don't know if I would agree.
I'm just saying,
I think it
because your mind, you expect more and better than what you got. Is it
true? But I also didn't like Spider-Man 3, and I feel like it's very similar to Spider-Man 3.
Well, let's not even get into that. That's going to be another podcast. Oh, that's a good
right. Well, hey,
write that down. Go.
So before we jump into the Dark Knight, though, Ty, I have a question. So what are some examples of requels? As I was looking over your show notes, the only one that came to my mind was maybe the new Star Trek reboots with Chris Pine. Is that a requel? Is that what kind of we're talking about here?
So that's kind of in that soft requel area. It kind of varies. It's a term that's just kind of really been coming out because of movies such as, example, like Scream 4 and Force Awakens, Jurassic World, where they've kind of taken and they've remade a movie, but it's also a sequel. Because if you put A New Hope and Force Awakens side by side, there's a lot of similarities, almost like as if
like Sharknado 4.
Yeah, that great film trilogy or quadrilogy.
Yeah, I've never even seen those movies. I don't even know. Okay, well, so that makes sense. That's pretty cool, man.
So it's just, and my idea is, some movies, I'm working on a podcast notes that it's going to be better to take the property and make it a prequel. So it's just kind of the idea of where would you take this property. Now, with The Dark Knight, it's a great movie. It's almost a standalone. Almost. Like, you can watch Batman Begins, and you can watch The Dark Knight Rises. They seem like they connect. They all connect, but you could almost watch The Dark Knight as a standalone.
Yeah.
So, like I said, today's question is, would you, Chase, want to do a direct sequel to The Dark Knight and pick up at the end, or would you want to do a sequel to Dark Knight Rises with John Blake?
So that is a very good question, and I think we have to look at your other question, what is the best story? And the answer to the best story question is different than what do I want Chase Smith answer. Because I would love to see a sequel to The Dark Knight immediately following Batman running from the cops on his bat cycle or whatever he called it. Like, I would love to see more in that world. I'd love to see the seed they planted for Mr. Reese. I'd love to see, all these things. Like, I don't want to see Batman 10 years later with a cane. Like, come on, man, you're Batman. But I think the best story would be the John Blake continual story with Joseph Gordon-Levitt assuming the mantle and the cowl.
And we do want to make a note, because on this episode, real quick, I forgot to say this earlier, we do understand that a lot of times when we're talking stuff, there may be stuff that's rumored to a reboot or remake. Like, we've already know that they've already rebooted Batman, and we're not even touching that. So this conversation doesn't go to, like, on some film properties, it might be just a complete reboot. This one is specifically to the two options we discussed about where we would make the sequel. I just wanted to throw that out there before any listeners might say, well, they have Affleck now. We know that, but that's another thing. This is about the Nolan films.
Yeah. And I think the Nolan teams, when they made these movies, set out to tell stories. Like, that was what they wanted to do. I think they cared about fanboys to an extent. That's why they work so hard in making it accurate and making it enjoyable for us. But I think at the end of the day, all they cared about was story, and especially the overarching story of Bruce Wayne and telling his overarching story over 3 films.
And that's one thing I think that we'll throw out the Amazing Spider-Man series forgot, is because if you listen to Nolan talk, he said he approached each film as an individual. If he had an idea to do a sequel, but he wouldn't end a film where the sequel was necessary to feel like you got the complete story. And with The Amazing Spider-Man, they had a complete film idea. They decided to cut up and spread out over 3 films and didn't take each film and make it one solid film at a time.
As The Amazing Spider-Man, is that Maguire or is that Garfield?
Garfield. That's why we...
They made 3 of those?
No, we didn't get that third one. That's why.
Oh, okay.
They didn't do a good enough job, because originally it was supposed to be the first film was the origin, and they were going to talk about the parents, but then they decided to spread that parent story over 3 films. And what we got was a soft, unneeded reboot with the first one, and then an overpacked sequel that was setting up too much and forgot that it was making one movie at the moment.
Yeah.
So, with that, do you want to hear my pitch first? And then you can...
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
All right. Let me readjust my baby girl here. She's wearing her Wonder Woman outfit as we podcast. She wants to represent her DC love, too. She had her Batgirl on earlier, but we had to change. So, my pitch. Here we go. My pitch would actually follow right after The Dark Knight. It would be called Legend of the Dark Knight. And here's how it would go. It has been a few weeks since Batman killed those men. We have these are just bullet points. So there are lawyers who are searching to find the truth. How or why would Batman do what he had done when the Joker was actively working against him? A new bill is up for review called the Dent Act, while Gordon is leading a team to hunt Batman but slightly allowing Batman to get away. During this time, Bruce and Alfred have returned to Wayne Manor and the Batcave. They are rejoicing in the fact that the mob was finished and is being rounded up and destroyed, but on the horizon are new things. Arkham Asylum has rebuilt on what's being called Arkham Island. With the Wayne Foundation has relocated all the people in the Narrows to new development homes, thus closing the Narrows off and making it Arkham Island. The Joker is the first patient that is there in solitude. And now Hugo Strange has been appointed as lead doctor, while we meet some of the new interns. We meet a Harleen Quinzel, a grad student who wants to work with the Joker, And we will use her story as an idea of what it means to be obsessed. We will use her as a parallel of Batman. Batman's obsessed with his parents' murder, his vengeance, and what does that do to him compared to her obsession with the Joker and what that does to her as a person. Gotham City officials have been getting packages marked with R's and question marks as the Riddler begins to rise. He has kind of been taking people and putting them in cat and mouse riddle games, somewhat similar but not as gruesome as like Saw, as in like he's pitting people against each other in these death-defying scenes. There's a group of kids who are all Bat fans who are investigating the crimes, and that's what could lead into Batman meeting Carrie Kelly, someone on the street who still believes in Batman and doesn't believe that he killed those people. Gordon had to bring in a new rookie cop, Harvey, that's helping lead the charge against Batman. And what happens is, while Batman and Alfred are finding a way to destroy the Riddler and Harley, they realize that Batman's existence in itself is giving rise to these super criminals. So Batman, once he is able to defeat the Riddler and stop Harley, he decides that it's time to put the Bat mantle down, to step away and use his resources as Bruce Wayne to better Gotham, because the Bat has served his purpose. And that would lead into him giving up Batman, and where we find him later in Dark Knight Rises.
Dude, I felt like I just watched that movie in my brain.
Oh, I know you can. Like, I sat here and was just like piecing it together. Like, I don't want to do much, but what is my theme? And I was like, my theme is basically his existence. You know, the Joker talks about escalation. Well, how far can you escalate something till it's destructive? And I feel like my biggest thing was I liked the Dark Knight's ending. It gave us this feeling of, oh, man. And then, like, Batman Begins was the beginning. The Dark Knight was a little bit more of him getting to be Batman. The film ends as we have kind of the idea of what Batman we want. And then the next film is Batman's been retired. It's like we didn't get that all-out Batman film.
Yeah.
And I feel like you have the potential to do a detective film against the Riddler, and then basically, once he's defeated, Batman hangs it up because he knows that he's the one that's causing the problems now.
Yeah, so that leads me to my pitch.
All right.
And before I do that, I'm going to let my dog in because my dog's barking. Hold on.
That's fine.
So that leads me to my pitch, Ty, and I think you highlighted in a couple things that I was wanting to pitch, but I think if you're going to do a sequel for The Dark Knight and you want to tell the story, you have to make it relatable and make it one that fits in that universe. And I think you still have to focus on Wayne and his idea of family. And I think you use that seed plan with Mr. Reese where he does start to kind of go a little crazy. But I think you have to incorporate Morgan Freeman's character. Maybe he gets kidnapped. And that is where Bruce Wayne finally, like, comes to grips. Like, he kind of did and started with The Dark Knight, but finally overcomes that psychological, like, hurdle of his family by realizing Alfred and Mr. Fox is his new family. And I think we had a very similar idea for the Riddler, kind of like the Saw kind of reality.
Quick note, real quick, because you brought up a good point. Something that I've come up with if I were to reboot Batman, because I don't think this idea fits well in the Nolan-verse. I think with Christian Bale's Batman, the idea of overcoming his parents' tragedy works. But I had an idea, like, if I was ever to, like, redo Batman, to where Batman forces himself to keep that pain. He won't get over it. He won't let it go. He forces himself to have that pain always, or else he's afraid that if he gets over it, he'll lose what he's built as Batman.
It's interesting.
But
I can see both ways.
yeah, I prefer the idea, like, because, I mean, in Nolan's film, Bruce is more human in person. He doesn't have as much of the psychological trauma that we see in some comic versions of Batman. So in this,
I also like how, yeah,
the creation of the new family would be a very nice addition.
You know, I also like it in your pitch how you incorporated Hugo Strange, and I think especially after he loses Rachel, you know, maybe Alfred and Fox do encourage him to go speak to a psychiatrist or a therapist or some type of counselor, and that's where we see that seed planted for Hugo Strange down the road, and I think you do have to kind of incorporate a little more of Arkham and the Arkham, you know, prison warden and all that stuff. I mean, there's a whole world you can start to explore that is really grounded. And I think that was a huge thing with the Nolan verse, is making it grounded. Now I don't know how you can ground a little bit of what happened in The Dark Knight Rises.
It did go a little far, but it's still trying to play it close.
So yeah, I think that lends itself really easily to a sequel that people would actually get to see Bruce Wayne as Batman. Now, I don't know. I think he was Batman in Begins, man. I mean, I think that was full Batman.
I can argue that as well. Yes.
But yeah, what do you got for a sequel to The Dark Knight Rises?
For Rises, I didn't get to put as much thought into it. I was kind of toiling with it with my head, because that would fall into more soft reboot, because you're going to continue the themes. And as much as I like John Blake and the idea of him as Batman, I kept trying to pick what type of Batman story would I want for Blake to lead. Like, what kind of universe would he build as Batman? Would he be the, like, and I started thinking more along the lines of, like, Batman Beyond. In the sense you have this young Batman, and then maybe Bruce comes back as more of the mentor, because he can't do it anymore, but he is needed, and he lives in the cave, kind of like Dark Knight Returns, where he's still dead, but...
Well, dude, I think one really easy way to solve that problem is do a lot of augmented reality things. Like, he could have all these augmented reality training sessions ready for Blake. In Blake's suit and mask, he could have, like, he could be he could be like Siri, but it's his voice. You know what I mean? And
yes.
And you can still, even through that, play the part where Blake comes to hate him because he, like, through this augmented reality, he questions all of his decisions and tells him to do things that he doesn't think is right. You know what I mean? You can still have that whole dilemma that's so crucial in the comics, you know, that love-hate relationship.
I think a way to do that would be, you have kind of John Blake start and he's doing his own thing, and then Bruce's pride kind of takes over, where he's like, no, you're not doing this well enough, I'm going to tell you how you should do this. And Bruce kind of rethinks his
I don't think you can have Bruce do it.
No, he can't do it. But that's what brings him back to be the mentor, to basically telling Blake what to do, being the man. Oh,
in my story, Bruce is still dead. Bruce is gone. All this is through the guilt that maybe Alfred places on him. Like, I wouldn't have done that stuff or whatever.
Now, does that tell you? Now, do you interpret the? I guess one thing we kind of skipped. Do you interpret the end of Rises that Bruce is alive and with Selina, or did Alfred just see what he wanted to see?
I forgot about that scene.
So in your story, would Bruce be alive somewhere, or would he actually physically be dead?
I would write a story as if he's dead.
Okay. I can get behind that. Now, would you want to do, story-wise, as far as the overarching, like, the villain and where Gotham is, and...
I forget where we stopped. Villain for Blake.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
So a villain for Blake in this sequel? Oh gosh, that's a good question. I would have to say, I think you have to at some point bring back the mob.
And what I was thinking with that is, before we jump into anything, I would do the Penguin. And I would do the Penguin
It's like an arms dealer.
as an arms dealer mob boss. The Penguin is his nickname. But
Yeah.
because of the events of Rises and so many of the wealthy dying or whatever, one of the founding families, Oswald Cobblepot, returns to Gotham to come and help and use his family's wealth to help bring Gotham back. So you have Oswald as the very face of renewing Gotham, but then you have the Penguin, which is still him, as his underground name. You could even have it to where he starts crime mobs again, and he even wears a mask or something like that looks kind of like a penguinish. So
And then Blake gets to be a detective again.
and it catches him, and it regrounds the story back, but we're using a familiar Batman character. I mean, it wasn't until Tim Burton that the Penguin became this more deformed looking person. He was always more of just a crook with a physical, tuxedo monocle that made him more of the Penguin.
Yeah, I think definitely that would work.
And as far as like with Blake's story as a person, I think Blake has challenges to overcome, in himself of, am I even worthy to be Batman?
Or what about this wrinkle, Ty? What about in this reality Bruce is dead and they find his body, and a young scientist named Dr. Freeze tries to rejuvenate this dead Bruce Wayne that everyone knows is now Batman? And then we get zombie Batman and Mr. Freeze taking over Gotham.
I'm about that. Mr. Freeze. I mean, I think there's ways to do every character grounded. You lose something in that, but you can also gain something with that. So, Nolan before was quoted saying he didn't want to do the Penguin. And I think if you look at it, doing the Penguin along the lines of Burton's Penguin, yeah, you're not going to get a good story. But if you look more at the other angles, you're going to get something better.
So, would there be any way that we can incorporate any other of the DC universe into these sequels or requels?
See, I like with the Nolan idea. I think it works best in keeping it separate. It works best in keeping it grounded and kind of in its own pocket. And I say that because,
we can't get like a Lex Luthor commercial in the background or anything like that.
No, and I say that only because, let's think about this. Right now we're getting the Affleck Batman, and his Batman is the idea of what Batman would look like in a world full of gods, and becoming in this world with much bigger elements. With Christian Bale's, is what would Batman look like if he was trying to exist in today on the street? And I think that's the core of that. So we need to keep it there.
I think that's good. That makes a lot of sense.
We could introduce maybe some characters like the Question or the Huntress, or if we want to do a proper Robin or something sidekick, but still keeping it grounded.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, you sold me on that. I like that.
I mean, it's just kind of like, Arrow season 1 was supposed to be a Arrow TV show if Nolan style grounded, but then in season 2 they decided they want to add in the Flash, and you can see where that show just starts going more into just full-on comic book from where it started. Yeah. And I think in some ways people wish it would have stayed in that first season. But any other final thoughts? We'll wrap this up. Baby girl looks like she's ready for some daddy-daughter playtime.
Yeah, what other villains do you see realistically could be in the Nolan verse?
I mean, you could do Poison Ivy in a sense of an eco-terrorist, where she's just a very smart, intelligent botanist, and
that's true.
And creates, uses her, just like the Scarecrow has fear gas, she could have pheromone gas, and then uses plants and toxins and things, and basically is a terrorist to try to save the Earth. Let's see.
I mean, any way to do Clayface or Killer Croc?
Killer Croc. See, I don't want to touch him because they did him in Suicide Squad. But Clayface, you could. With Clayface, what you could do is basically the actor. He'd go back and do the Matt Hagen story of the actor, but the clay, instead of him getting it swallowed or whatever, mutating with him, he has clay that's a molding putty that he can put on his face and shape it to anything he needs. It's that a little bit of stretch, but
and maybe he uses that to like rob banks or to like, you know what I mean, like be people's doppelganger and really cause some trouble. You know what I mean? Like I think that'd be really cool.
Exactly. Like he there is a way, and if we had more time, we could probably pick apart more villains and things. But yeah, I mean, you definitely could do that. I mean, you could even, if you wanted to, you could even go into, if we're being inspired by Batman Beyond, the idea of the Jokers, a gang of rebellious teenagers and young adults or whatever who were inspired by the Joker and wear makeup and act like clowns, and there's no superpowers there, and that's believable too.
That's true.
But all right, man. Well, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Dude, yeah, it was awesome. I think it's a great idea, and wish you all the best, man.
I will let you know what other ideas come up that I think you might want to be on, but this one I got excited about. So, go ahead. Where can people find you if they want to find you online? Anywhere, like Twitter, Facebook. But you already mentioned that you do the Chase Smith podcast. Anywhere else?
Yeah, so if they want to find me or contact me, you can find me on Twitter at the Chase Smith, and on Facebook you can just search my name. I do host the Chase Smith podcast. You can go to my website, thechasesmith.com, click on podcast, and get on any of the episodes. Go to iTunes, Google Play, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Search the Chase Smith and it should come up. We got a lot of great things coming up, and I'm getting ready to launch actually a new podcast with a Browns insider called the Oranges Oranger Browns podcast. It'll be a weekly Browns recap pod, and we're excited to get that launched. And that's breaking news. I haven't really shared that with anyone yet. So there you go, man. Some breaking news on the premiere first episode of the Requel podcast.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that insight, and appreciate your time, Chase.
Hey, love you, brother. Always a great time to talk Batman and Nolan and the Dark Knight. Love you guys. Love your family. And hope you guys have a great day.
All right. You too, buddy. Bye.
All right. See ya.
Look up in the sky.
Look up in the sky.
Look in the sky.